When does a gimmick band become a legitimized band? So I'm going to throw a name out there, which I think when they all first came out, we were like, huh? What's this all about? Slipknot. Slipknot, 1996, drops its first debut. We were like, oh, it's loads of guys in boiler suits and masks, bit of a gimmick. But they are legitimized as one of the staples of the metal scene for the last sort of now 30 years, give or take. So there are a lot of bands, Mushroom Head, to the face mask wise. You've got bands that do dress up. We talk a lot about some of these visual bands from Japan, and we talk about, is it a gimmick? But there are a lot of these bands that have gone from being gimmicks to being legitimately classed as idols, powerhouses within rock and metal. So what makes it go, or what in your eyes takes them from being a gimmick to being a legitimized? I'm going to throw it to the dog.
Yes.
Your answer.
Hello, mate.
So this is Ozzy.
Ozzy's got to give us some answers.
Ozzy, he's the Prince of Barkness.
So you might as well go, Dave. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, tough question, actually. I do think that, using your example, Slipknot, I was I don't know how old I was then. I was young and impressionable. And seeing this band come out faceless, that in itself as the gimmick was just amazing, because there was this mystique. There was this almost sinister part of them. You're like, oh, I don't know what these faces are. What does their human face look like instead of this fucking dick nose, And you look at it and you think, wow, like, because it wasn't just them that started theatrical, because it's theatrical, it's theatrics. You look at Alice Cooper, you look at Meatloaf, you look at, for want of a better term, Ozzy Osbourne, that kind of that realm. They were doing it, but it was the pure aggression that Slipknot had, which made the masks way more sort of apt. I'd probably say when they carry on and it's not just the one hit, like for example Mushroom Head. Now there was that, like, I'm just using your example, but there was a whole feud between who did it first, and originally, I still don't know now, but it was apparently Mushroom Head that started doing that first, and then Slipknot, whether they copied, I don't know, it doesn't really matter now, but Mushroom Head have kind of been left wayward because Slipknot carried on and they made a second outing, if you will, let's call it as an EP or as an album. I think it's legitimate when there is a secondary follow-up with the same novelty, gimmick. Look at Ghost, that whole thing. At first, everyone really thought it was a bit weird, a bit awkward, but they brought it out with a second outing, with the second album, after they were picked up after their first EP, which just absolutely blew up. I think it's probably when they are legitimized, when they have a second wind, so to speak, like a second album or a second project with the same gimmick. And if that's successful, I think that's where they start moving forward.
Okay. Anyone else got any other thoughts on this?
If I can just...
go for it.
I don't have a whole heap to say, but essentially, I think that gimmicks are gimmicks. As Dave said, anything that adds to the theatre of a show can add, additional kind of wow factor or a bit of mystery or, all of that sort of stuff. But ultimately, I think that a gimmick works, or rather, let me rephrase. A gimmick will always fail if your music isn't better than the gimmick. Like, using Slipknot as an example, Slipknot's music would be great whether they were wearing boiler suits and masks or not. They're brutal. They were genre defining in the late 90s, and that would have worked mask or not. Whereas if your whole image and your fan base and everything else is based around that gimmick, then ultimately you will get found out because your music's terrible. And that I think is my kind of take on that.
Yeah, I can come in on that as well. I think Dave and Alan, you make great points. Let's use Slipknot as an example. I mean, no, I don't think any artist likes to be accused of using a gimmick, do they? They would try to use the word an innovation because it has connotations of being cheap and shallow, doesn't it? But Slipknot deserve credit because, one, in 1999 there was no chance of even listening to extreme metal. You know, they were playing grindcore and death metal, and then they had the Korn influence, and it is because of the imagery, isn't it? And that really did suit the music. They became legitimized because with that power and that platform on that second album, track number 1, I think, is it called People Equal Shit? That is just fucking grindcore. And this is a band who knew they were going to get to number 1, both sides of the Atlantic. So I think they got a lot of respect for that. And when you speak to a lot of the bands you assume are elitist, like Morbid Angel and Obituary, and people would say, oh, Slipknot metal's crap nowadays. Like, no, this is great because it means that kids are interested in our music again, and this is a gateway. So to answer that, they became legitimized because of what they did with that fame and popularity. And I think they really were keen to show, weren't they, that, hey, this is where we come from. I mean, for example, I first heard about Pig Destroyer through Joey Jordison in an interview in a magazine, and he was like, oh, check out the new Pig Destroyer album. I was like, what a fucking name for a band that is. Who are they? And then Relapse Records. So I just think it's great what they did with it. Just one more thing though, there are some gimmicks that aren't image based. Like, do you remember that? Does anyone remember that band Kylesa who had 2 drummers? What the fuck? What's the point of that? There was also a band in the 90s called Cop Shoot Cop, who were an industrial band on a major label, 2 bass players. Why? You know, so certain things have never caught on, like Cynic, the progressive death metal band, the fucking vocoder vocals. Fortunately, they never caught on. So there are gimmicks that fail, aren't they, as well? But yeah, I think Slipknot is the perfect example, Dave. There, you've really helped to set the question.
Is there any, Andy, within your sort of music that you listen to, you know, that really miserable, horrible, funeral, doomy, miserable, cunty sort of rubbish that you listen to? Is there any like gimmicky bands there?
I mean, there's gimmicky band members. I mean, my immediate thoughts to your intro is Messiah Marklin, former vocalist of Candlemass. He had like the monk's cowl, so that was a gimmick of sorts. But my sort of take on this was this is quite naive of me, really, because I like the bands that you mentioned, Kirk. You know, like some Morbid Angel and Obituary, and then I was looking at people like Slipknot and thinking, well, they must be rubbish because they've got to use a gimmick. They've got to wear masks and boiler suits. Why can't they just wear band t-shirts and ripped jeans and high top trainers? You know, if music's that good, you don't need a gimmick. But as I've obviously matured and listened to more and more music, then I think there's definitely a place for, I mean, is gimmick the right term? I'm seeing, you know, I like it when bands actually have a stage presence, a theme. You know, the Infernal Sea is a band I saw in Cambridge, you know, last year, for example, that they've got a look. Again, it's the mystique, the masks, you know, the long black sort of coats, as it were. So, I mean, again, like everything, there's a place for both. But I agree, some of them are ridiculous and gimmicks for gimmick's sake, like the band you quoted, Kurt, the 2 drummers, the 2 bass players. But yeah, okay. That's it.
So there are bands like Gwar, for instance, who are obviously a gimmick-based band. They're all dressed up in their costumes and stuff like that. Play fun music, aggressive music, and you go there because it's meant to be a bit tongue-in-cheek. It's a bit dressed up in all their costumes. So you don't tend to take bands like Gwar very seriously. Recent bands that kind of come out, we've obviously got the band Sleep Token and the singer Vessel. And that, to me, that comes across as very gimmicky, the concept of Sleep Token as a band, and no one has names and everyone's hidden. Everyone's automatically going, oh, it's very much another reissue of what Slipknot did with no names and stuff like that. And it has, I have to be honest, when bands come out with a gimmick like that, it puts me off the band. It's, I kind of, like Andy thinks there, it's like, well, if you're having to go down that, I'm not really that interested in finding out that much about your music. I am going to go down there because I've got a live stream with a load of Sleep Token fans who are going to try and convince me next week that Sleep Token's a great band. I don't know why I've put myself to have 5 Sleep Token bands grilling me, but that's going to be a really interesting live stream.
Do you want me to join you for that one, Dave?
I thought, sorry, I'm going to go into it, but I'm batting from my side. We'll see what happens.
What does Stick think of this?
I pretty much agree with what Al said. You need to have the quality of your music to back you up with it. If you have a gimmick but your music's terrible, then it's a gimmick. It's terrible. What's the point in doing it? If it's something you can listen to and think is good, and the gimmick just adds to your live show, then it is legitimate and becomes something good.
I mean, we've seen some bands throughout the Metal to Masses going in with kind of gimmick looks, and I guess because you've got to imagine bands like Slipknot at some stage when they formed weren't all completely their finished product that we got to see in 1996 with the first album. There was work before that they did in the live scene, and they were practicing, and they're going to rehearse, they're going to their gigs, and they're like, well, let's try a different mask. Let's see, maybe should we do wear boiler suits? Should we?
They used to dress up as nuns at one point.
Did they?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
The old singer was dressed up as a nun. One of the other guys was dressed up, I think, in like S&M gear, but they had their faces and stuff out. Like gimp stuff.
And the thing is, if you'd seen that at those stages, watching them, would you have been going and then heard a bit about Slipknot later down the line? Like, whoa, I have no interest in seeing that band because I've seen them. And so is it important to get, if you're going to go down a gimmick route, about nailing that gimmick early on when you're building the band? Or is it a case of it doesn't really matter in the early days? Is it, you can just try lots of things and see what works? Any thoughts?
I mean, you could always rebrand, couldn't you? Like, that's what Slipknot did. When they released their first ever EP, Make, Feed, Kill, Repeat, I think they were just starting to really get what they were going to be doing, which I think for them was more shock. And at the time, because I've seen a load of interviews about this, they didn't want to be part of the whole music scene. They wanted to play music, but they didn't want to be part of it. And I think at the time, it was all very much pretty boys, I think, that were in that music scene. So I think they started putting masks on because of that, and I think the gimmick, like you guys have said, has it took off.
Okay.
It needs to be developed. I mean, I'm not an expert on any of this, but you can see the progress and development of the Slipknot look. We keep talking about them as the main example, but it's there's been a development of each of those characters. They haven't stagnated and thought, well, this is working for us. We're selling albums. They're always working on that look, that gimmick, that stage presence, that feel of the band, which is commendable.
I'm surprised we've not mentioned black metal. I mean, people won't like me using the word gimmick, will they? The Puritans describe that, but I think it helps when you put on an Immortal album. If you didn't know what they look like, oh, this is decent black metal, some thrash metal riffs. Then you see an image of the band, you're like, this is fucking amazing.
And you start off.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't you? Because they're holding battle axes. They've got these giant arm spikes. They make the most ridiculous poses. I mean, if you came across people like that in a forest, you would run away thinking that they're going to murder you.
So you've actually brought up a good point there, Kirk. So there's a band, what was it called? War Kings.
Yes. War Kings.
That's another great example of a gimmick one there. So we've got some Knights of the Crusade. We've got a warrior queen type singer.
There's a Viking.
We watch it. I'm just like, we watched a video of it.
The Roman Centurion, wasn't there?
There's this Roman Centurion. And you're looking at it going, I just don't get what the hell's going on. This feels like people have gone to a costume shop and just gone, correct, I'll just buy a Centurion's outfit and I'll wear that on stage. And you think, what's the gimmick? I get the band name War Kings, and this is all about war, and doesn't kind of vibe for me watching some guys in Knights of the Crusader outfits on stage, and it puts me off wanting to get into the band because it just doesn't connect. I don't know, it feels a little bit.
But you don't want to be a king, Dave?
Huh?
You don't want to be a king?
No, I'm not a king, thank you very much. I'll be a prince. Anyway, we should move on to another topic. I think we've talked about that one for a while.
Can I just add a different angle on that as well?
Yeah, go for it.
What's your feelings if a band is doing a gimmick, but it's not the whole band? So you've got one, maybe two members of the band dressing up, playing the part, putting on the show. Another band member is just there in jeans and a vest top.
Yeah, that doesn't work at all, does it? In my opinion.
No, it's whole
Again, it's something we've seen. It's consistency of the package, what you're delivering. I've seen it, even if it's not just like a costume, it's a case of someone, if you get 4 people on the stage and there's no continuity with the look, and there's some of our local scene, we've talked about that. I won't say names, but there are a few that you couldn't work out. They all look like they're playing from different genres and different styles, and it just looks like 5 people have got on stage and decided to play a song that they luckily all knew. But they don't feel like you're looking at a package on stage. You're not looking at a unit, and people forget it's a theatrical show. You're performing for the audience. It's not like you're in a rehearsal room where there's 5 of you standing there. And I've seen that quite a lot, where 5 guys will just stand there looking at their frets like that, because they don't know how to perform to an audience, and they've forgotten they're actually putting on a show. And you're sitting there going, music's great, but this is really boring to watch. And you tune out. You think, and we've said it on a few bands in recent times where we've gone, really got into them. I thought their music was really good. By about 10 minutes into their set, you're like, I'm a bit bored now, because there's just nothing going on stage. You're just watching it going, there's nothing to look at. Just don't like it. But I agree, yeah, Sticks. And when we've had a couple of people trying to do changeovers and they put jackets on, and you're like, okay, you're putting a character on, but the rest of the band aren't doing anything in character, and kind of need to work on that and just get that continuity across your whole band and get that whole vibe going on.
All in all, from what Stick said,
go on.
Yeah, I don't know which one it is, but I'm back here. There's a black metal CD that I got, and there's inlay, and there's 4 of them, and there's like Angel Raper Hell Killer on bass, Grey Violator on guitar, and on second guitar, Dave Smith. You know, all the other guys look like they're immortal with the spikes and the black, and this bloke just in like a black t-shirt. It just, I mean, I don't know what their live show looks like, but I guess it's a replication of that sort of band shot.
The one time I can think it has worked is Limp Bizkit. Obviously, Wes being the way he is,
True, yeah.
all the costume, the rest of the band are not. That's the one time I can think of it actually working.
I wonder why it's worked. Because I agree. I wonder why. I wonder what makes that setup. Maybe it's the kind of music about not giving a fuck.
Maybe,
and it's Wes.
Yeah.
He's like the weirdo in the corner, isn't he? But he just so happens to be super talented at what he's doing.
Bastard.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe Maynard from Tool, I suppose, is another one, isn't it? Some of the image that he presents on stage, and the others just stand in the background with the hair over the face, and the drummer Danny just wears like a Boston Celtics basketball top, doesn't he? And then you've got Maynard on with a wig and painted blue and looking like some strange sexual deviant as he normally does on stage. So yeah, that's very similar, isn't it? And I think it's that one we can explain the charisma of the frontman. The Limp Bizkit one is harder to explain, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah.